Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. So this is episode 50. 50. I know technically episode 52 will be like a full year or a year's worth of programming or whatever. But even then, that's still like that's a lot. And it's cool that some of you have been here the whole time. Some of you are new subscribers. Some may not even be subscribers, might just be visiting. Like when you land on that little spot in Monopoly that makes no sense because Monopoly is outdated. Sorry, uh, game designer kind of rearing its ugly head. So yeah, episode 50. My name is Bryan CP Steele, and I will be your nerd today. So today is going to be a very interesting episode. We're going to talk a little bit about my week that I've just gone through, and the a couple of very cool things coming up. And then I get to kind of just talk about how, although I know a lot of us are going through some pretty rough pretty rough times altogether, between not being able to see our friends in person, and not being able to like go out to hang out at the bar or go to sports events or go to gaming conventions or the comic book shop or your local magic tournament, or there's all these things that we can't do. That even though that's the case, it is still a monumentous year, and there's still a ton of time left for us to kind of make it our own and make it the, well, frankly, as the episode as the episode displays, and as my current shirt says, the year of the nerd. So this shirt, by the way, so normally my sponsor is Armor Class 10, an apparel company who you definitely should order stuff from. They're amazing. Use the special discount code TFAPN to Fappin. And this week, this particular shirt is not an Armor Class 10 shirt. This is actually an Artemis shirt. My wife's art company, Artemis Portraits, she does t-shirt designs. She sells t-shirt designs through the website known as TeePublic. And I'll put the link up in the description. But this is one of her shirts she designed specifically at the kind of the top of the year, at the top of 2020, because again, a lot of people have noticed that D20, couple of 20 sitting next to each other makes for 2020, and it's becoming kind of a recurring theme. But it is sort of something that is it's a big milestone. It's a year that will stand out for many reasons. But so this week's episode, while I am not wearing an Armor Class 10 shirt, I am wearing an Artemis Portrait shirt, because in a way they are also a sponsor to the show. I am still talking with Armor Class 10 to see if I will be getting new apparel soon for future episodes. Maintaining the sponsorship is one thing, but with this whole lockdown and everybody kind of tight pulling tight those purse strings, and the kind of self quarantining and the social distancing, I know a lot of companies, especially companies that are only run by a couple of people, are having difficulties, whether they're financial difficulties or time difficulties, or I can't keep my shop open because our local governor won't let me. Those sorts of things are happening all over the country, all over the world. And so I am not pushing AC10. I'm not pushing those guys real hard to get me my next shipment of shirts out. They've got a lot on their plate, and frankly, if I have to double up and wear a shirt you've seen before, or gasp shirts that aren't from my sponsors, as long as I still talk them up and say, please go to their website and buy stuff from them, help them keep their doors open, then I feel like I'm still doing my part. And I would much rather them be safe and in their homes than pressing a bunch of shirts for me and the show. So I'm sure we'll get back to it, and we'll get back to all that sort of thing soon. But right now, in this kind of unsure, weird financial limbo that a lot of people are in, I am absolutely fine with telling the world to buy from them. Use my discount code if you want, even if you didn't see the shirt here. Just please, give them your patronage, both to Armor Class 10 and to Artemis Portrait. Now, Artemis Portrait does not have a discount code for the show because TeePublic is a side website that does their own sort of discounts. And I think right now there's like a 30% off because of charity relief or something along those lines. But there's always something going on. Take a look, pop over, follow the links that I've got in the description. You'll find, Natalie does some really cool pop culture t-shirts, some things from like Lucifer and the Magicians, some very cool stuff. I'm always talking her up as far as her art goes, but her t-shirts are also really cool. So let's get into the week in Bryan. How's that sound? How about I take a drink of my my almost out? Oh, I didn't realize I was almost out. So I'm gonna have to make it last, so it lasts the whole show. Let's talk about the week in Bryan. All right, so this week I didn't really get to do a lot as far as gaming goes. Played a little Xbox with my buddies and my son, and that sort of thing, and got a little bit of painting done. I painted a set of the Gods of Asgard for the CMON board game Blood Rage, which is my still to date my favorite board game. We'll see when Project Elite comes out. Project Elite is a very, very cool fast-paced dice rolling game. But Blood Rage is probably my favorite game board game that I've ever had. Now, I don't consider it a party game. I don't consider it, a drinking game or anything like that. But it is if I was having a board game day and someone was like, give me your short list of like 3 games that you'd want to play, Blood Rage is going to always be on that list. But I had an extra set of the Gods of Asgard, the plastic figures that you put on the map to show which realms are being influenced by which gods. And I was like, you know what? I'm currently sitting on no commission work. I'm waiting for some commissions to come in. So honestly, if you're watching this and you're someone who's like, I kind of do want some models painted by Bryan, or it'd be kind of cool to have some models painted by Bryan, now is the perfect time to throw them my way, because there's no one in the queue. It's currently empty, and I'm starting to paint some stuff for myself. I finished up an entire orc armada fleet, flock, I don't know, for Aeronautica Imperialis. Still haven't played the game, but I've got a ton of painted orcs for it. Let's see, painted the Blood Rage figures, and I think that's about it. Finished up my Transformers, but I finished those up last week, actually. It's weird not having a ton of stuff. I definitely have stuff that I can still paint and get into, but it's just weird not having a backlog of stuff that I need to get done. Where's I going with this? Yeah, where was I going with this? We're talking about got a lot of painting. Got the Blood Rage guys done. Oh yeah, so basically, I was looking for things to kind of fill in the time that isn't just me sitting there staring at a screen on my Xbox. And I mentioned last week that I had a ton of fun playing in one of Satine's online D&D sessions, and it inspired me to put together a group of my people, people who I don't ever get to see even outside of quarantine, like my industry friends from like the West Coast and the East Coast and all over the place. I put together a small group with help from my friend Jake and Rick. Rick from Rick Rolls America, an awesome show that we're hopefully going to get to see more of once he is no longer sequestered to hotels. But we gathered a group of people, and I am going to this weekend officially start running a video conferencing D&D game. Hopefully it will go well. Hopefully it will come together well, and I'll be able to record it. Hopefully it will become something that every few weeks or so I'll be able to put out another a long video that is the game sessions. So you can kind of follow along, and then when the six of us get a chance to meet in person at a show or at like Gen Con or something, maybe we can turn it into the online game finally meets in person, something like that. Again, I don't know where it'll go. It might be something that we just do for a while we're quarantined and looking for stuff to fill the void. But either way, it should be a lot of fun. I am ecstatic to hopefully do right by these guys and maybe cast a little better attention on me and the channel here, and we'll see what happens. So speaking of the channel and speaking of people who cast some really good light on me and the work that I do, so last night I was invited to be a guest appearance on a Twitch channel. Alyssa Fadden's, I believe it's Fadden. It could be Faden, but I'm pretty sure it's Fadden. It's Alyssa's Twitch channel. Alyssa is a phenomenal map maker. She makes just gorgeous city maps and like like these giant sprawling metropolitan areas where like each individual building is specific and not just a cookie cutter of each other. She colors them, if required. Like she does really, really, really good work. And this year was kind of special because, as she let us know yesterday, she did a couple of different versions of the GaryCon map. Not just the GaryCon map for the actual like location of here's the rooms and the ballrooms and that kind of thing, which she did. She made a really cool stylized D&D style map of the Grand Geneva grounds, which is awesome. It was badass. But she also, for the like special adventures that Luke and Ernie and those guys had put together, and I think Noble Frog, Noble Knight, Noble Dwarf, I don't remember. Somebody had asked for a very specific map be made for their GaryCon adventure, and so she did that. But she's crazy talented, and every week she gets on her Twitch channel and works on her map while she talks and interviews other people. And this particular week, she had myself and a gentleman by the name of Tom Nelson, who is I want to say the title he goes by is like the Midwest Miniatures guy. He's a great painter, and he does commission painting as well. And so we basically spent a couple hours last night talking about painting, what we charge, what do we love these brushes, do we like these brushes, do we like these paints. It was just a really kind of cool, it was a cool back and forth that was originally born out of the fact that all three of us, we painted the Gary Con Thunderfrost dragons as charity pieces for this year's show. Well, since this year's show didn't happen, they're still going to auction off the pieces, as far as I know, to get money for Gary Con and whatnot. But I'm the only one that actually had sent theirs to Ernie so far. They're still holding on to their dragons, and they're just going to basically bring it in next year when the show happens. But either way, that's kind of where the three of us sort of found even ground and became friends over long distance. I've known Alyssa for a while. I had not known Tom, but I would never say we were close. We were just kind of acquaintances. But with the painting of these dragons, we had something to kind of fall together on and discuss and talk about very specific. Oh hey, where did you start? What kind of color palette did you go with? Oh, how did you get your base that way? There was just a lot of, you work on the same thing, and it makes it easier for you to have a ground base to just kind of start things off. And so we spent last night basically talking a lot about our dragons, what sorts of things we chose to do with them, as opposed to what each other's unique ideas. It was just a really fun night, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get back together and do it again sometime. Tom and I were actually talking last night, is that it might be fun for the three of us to all buy the same figure, whether online or from your local stores or whatever, and have a Twitch session of the three of us. Okay, as soon as we all have it primed, we all have it ready to go, but then as soon as the Twitch show starts, hit that clock button and then go, okay, because her shows are an hour and a half long. At an hour and a half, that's when we check to see don't show anybody the model until then. And then at that time, everybody puts it up on the camera to see how far along we've made it. I think it's a cool idea, and I'm sure we're going to try and make it happen at some point. But either way, it was a lot of fun, and it was neat to talk about kind of our different processes and what we, where we stand on, where we stand on how Gary Con, how it became, when it became a virtual con, and the auctions didn't happen, that we still stood behind the show, and we wanted our pieces to still be up there and making money for Luke and those guys. It was just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and she had, I had never actually, that I know of, I had never been on a Twitch before. So it was neat to see I've done a lot of Facebook Live and stuff, but it was neat to see the little comments and questions popping up on the side from her viewers. And hopefully we did them justice, and we told them all the things that they needed to know. And I know that immediately after the Twitch was over, I had picked up a couple new subscribers on the show, a couple new friends, a couple new Facebook friends, at least one more Twitter follower. So I know that people were listening, which is good. And we'll see from there. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully they'll see this one and go, yeah, that was me. Comments, leave it in the box. But yeah, it was a good time, and it just reinforces the fact to me that yeah, we're all in kind of weird positions. We're all sort of starting to get the cabin fever that being shut in really instills. But if you focus the right way, and you really kind of point out that we have the technology to be able to do it, you can still be very social. You can still have a good time, even when you're shut into your home or your local area for X number of weeks. Um, the uh, the show itself, the Twitch show, only lasted like, what was it, like an hour and a half? It might have went over a little bit, like maybe an hour and 45. But it's just because we were having so much fun, and it made me wonder if. Or it made me, I shouldn't say wonder, it reinforced the fact that I think that when I get this online D&D thing off the ground this weekend, if everything records right and everything, transfers over into the right kinds of files and whatnot, that I think that it's going to be fun. I think you guys might have a good time. That there might be people that want to watch us play on a regular basis, which will be cool. I don't know. Again, it's little dreams like that. But it is all that kind of mentality and all that kind of feel that makes me really do feel that even though we're dealing with some hard stuff, 2020 is still actually our year. People, there are more games being played now. The tabletop simulator websites are being overtaxed. They're being pushed to the limit because of the number of people that are that they want to play games. They're nerds. They want to enjoy. They want to do all the stuff that they do normally, but they can't because they can't get out of their house without risking catching the crud. It is, yeah, again, it's weird for me to try and be so positive. It's a good time to be a nerd. It really is. It is a good time to be a nerd, to be a geek or dork or whatever you want to call it, to be part of our gaming culture. And that's in spite of this whole virus thing. There's always the people who are like, well, of course it doesn't bother this guy. He lives in his mom's basement, or he doesn't have any friends, so it doesn't matter. He's got no one to socially distance from. Okay, haha. All jokes aside, there is something to be said for the people in this world that are mentally stable enough and confident enough and happy enough when they're in their own bubble that they don't need anybody else's. And there's a lot of gamers out there that are like that they don't need anybody else. They don't need a boyfriend or a girlfriend or best friend to come knocking on their door every 2 seconds. They're just happy to be playing games and enjoying themselves. There's a giant spike in electronic gaming, of course. Xbox multiple times as their online service freaked out because there's a sheer volume of people that are playing stuff right now. If there's an industry that we're gonna take a hit, everybody is. No one is immune to this economic issue that's happening. But emotionally and mentally, I do think that gaming and the kind of gamer subculture and the kind of comic book subculture, that they're gonna come out of this feeling pretty good, just for the sheer fact that right now people need things to take their mind off of being stuck indoors. They need to be able to just get away, look outside a window and go, oh, I wish I could be out there. All right, roll the dice. There's a reason why we enter these fantasy worlds sometimes for role-playing games, or we want to get away. And right now's the time to want to get away. It's very heavy out there, and the same can be said for, honestly, anybody who needs to, or who has that kind of that itch to be social in certain ways. You can do so through all these the webcams and streaming devices and tablets, and there's all these cool different ways for us to stay connected now. And people with more forethought than I have set up ways to play all of your favorite games, even down to role-playing games and miniature games, online using these simulators. Yeah, it isn't the same as sitting around the table and joking around with your fellow players or your DM. And it's not the same about pushing models around that you've painted as a hobby, or that, you know, seeing these giant size comparisons on the battlefield. Instead, it's two widgets on a two-dimensional, you know, graphics board. Yeah, it's not the same. It really isn't. But it's still something that you can do to stay connected to the world, to not let your solitude fully get you down, to seek out a little bit of social help without breaking that social distancing. It's good. And I think, which is what most of this video is going to be talking about, is there are a lot of people in my industry that will be affected by this, you know, stores and distro channels and things like that. But there's a whole lot of us that, because what we do is the creation aspect of things, and that's normally months ahead of when they ever are going to be putting ink to page or books in crates and you know, pouring metal for figures or whatever. We aren't really affected that badly. You know, I'm still working every day. I'm still, you know, painting occasionally, but I'm still generally doing my spycraft work for Crafty, setting up like pages and forms, and hopefully getting some accounts for Big Child, and with permission from the owner of the other company that I'm working for, that has hired me to help. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing for the rest of the year of the nerd. And this is very important to me, and hopefully others out there who have played my games in the past, very particularly Dark Age. And I know that this video is probably going to get spread around quite a bit, with probably that little note at the bottom. It's like, go ahead and start at 27 minutes in, because that's when Bryan starts talking about important stuff. But either way, I'm going to be talking about the game that I have been hinting at, leaving teasers in places. And that primarily is Bryan's Transformers. No, I'm totally kidding. This is actually my binder where I keep all of my stuff for my Transformers, my Transformers miniatures game that is still very unofficial. Very, I mean, it's awesome and it's coming together great. But it is extremely unofficial, and I'll be working on it in my spare time for many moons. Hopefully getting it to a point where I might be able to legitimately make a pitch to the powers that be, and maybe get a book printed that has my rules and stats and stuff. But I saw my binder on the floor because I was working on it earlier, and I was like, "Whoo, I can tease that." No, what I am going to spend probably the latter half of this video on is talking to you about the miniatures game that is kind of going to be sort of taking over the design elements in my head, the development elements in my head, for the rest of this year, for the rest of the year of the nerd. And that is, and yes, I do have permission from the owning company. He said that I can't go and like tell you all of the details. I can't be like, you know, here's all the little bits and bobs, because a lot of that stuff's also not completely hammered out yet. We're still working on everything, but I can at least give you the overview and get you as excited about it as I was when I heard about coming onto the project. If you're a skirmish miniature player out there, who's big into sci-fi, I'll explain, and especially if you're one of my Dark Age fans, I'm going to explain why this is an important, very very important thing to keep your eyes on and start getting excited about. So, I a gentleman that I talked to at Adepticon either last year or the year before works for a company called Resnova. Resnova currently makes a pretty cool card game, and I believe they've got some other things in the works that are not miniatures related. But the gentleman at Resnova reached out to me and asked if I would be amenable to working on a sci-fi skirmish miniatures game, and we talked a little bit more about it, got all the various NDAs signed and all that, and I found out that it is a complete revival of a game that I used to play 20 years ago, or like 15 years ago at least, called Warzone. Dun, dun, dun. So Warzone is a miniatures game that was originally based off of a set of stories / role-playing books called the Mutant Chronicles. A very, very cool setting, and you really, I'm sure I'm going to jaw on about the setting here a little bit. But if you aren't familiar with it, I would pop onto Google, do like a Wikipedia search for the Mutant Chronicles, read kind of some of this background, do a Google image search for Mutant Chronicles Warzone miniatures, take a look at some of the aesthetic. But basically, to give you a quick history of this game, because it is similar. Part of the reason why that Alex, the head at Resnova, part of the reason why he got in touch with me is not only is he a Dark Age fan, and understands all the work and the shining and polishing that I did over at that license, but he understands that when I took over Dark Age, it was, for all intents and purposes, a dying brand. It was a game that really wasn't being played very much at conventions. It was starting to flounder dramatically. And then it was handed to me, and I did some rewrites. I did some redevs, changed some of the flow, added to the storyline, gave it some of my own personal spin, and we took that game to, from the edge of destruction all the way to being one of the best things that we sold at every convention. But the reason why, besides the fact that he knew me as a person, he knew me as a developer, and he knew I did good work, the original Warzone miniatures game, which the original rule book looked just like this. So that's the original miniatures rulebook that they came out with, and that's like the first edition Warzone book, and the initial game was made up of the original development team had several members of that design team that were people who helped make Dark Age, so they already had. There's already some of that kind of that heart and soul that was there. There's a reason why when I for the first time ever picked up any Dark Age stuff, why when I started playing it, I looked at a lot of my friends and was like, man, this plays a lot like, it's different. It's definitely different, but it plays a lot like Warzone, and it's one of the reasons why it took so well to me, because again, they already had a little bit of that same kind of backbone feel when it came to the rules, but it was a different game and had different different power structures, different armies, different aesthetic, that kind of thing. But the original game just had these. It was a skirmish-ish game. And I say ish because you could play it to a higher degree pretty easily. It took well to it took well to the growth of a collection and wanting to play larger games. It just made the games longer. But at its heart, it was still kind of a high end skirmish. And in Warzone, you are you're one of the very many factions. Then you fighting for resources or territory or whatever, very similar to like any other miniature game at the time. You can find reasons to have people battle within the narrative like that. But at the most part, it was get together and shoot your neighbor. That original Warzone miniatures game was put out by a company called Target Games. When after several years and the game really it started to kind of come into its own, Target Games put out a very cool box set looks just like this. So they basically made like a second edition of the game and put it out in this box set, that updated some of the models, definitely updated the rules, but it turned it into a little bit more of a small army game rather than a large skirmish game. If that makes sense, you had a lot more squads running around on the table rather than individual models doing things. But it was a ton of fun, and me and my friends, we played the snot out of it. In fact, we actually had tournaments at the local university that people drove down to, and like it was a big deal. And after that second edition came out, they expanded the world. They basically added some extra factions. They grew they grew the story quite a bit as to, oh hey, this is what's going on between the different factions, and then very shortly after that, the game just sort of dried up. Now I don't know the specifics. I'm sure there's lots of stories involved, but from what I understand, there was something to do with Target Games, and then suddenly there was not a Target Games anymore. So again, I don't know any of the specifics. I'm not even going to speculate. But what that did is that it put Warzone / Mutant Chronicles just kind of out there in limbo. Well, very shortly after that, a small game company called Excelsior Games, grabbed it up and tried to make a version of the game called what was it? Was it Ultimate Warzone? I don't remember, or the War Across the Universe or something along those lines. But basically, they tried to polish a few things from the second edition that Target Games put out, but for the most part, they were just hoping to sort of plug the game back in. You've been sitting on the shelf unplugged for a long time, and if I just go, okay, bloop, and plug you back in, bam, people will start playing again. But unfortunately, the price point wasn't there. There had been enough time that people weren't really interested in buying all these new things that Excelsior wanted to have people create. It was a rough time. And in similar fashion, Excelsior, as far as I know, the company sort of dried up, and Warzone went with it. And fast forward a few more years, and a very pretty, very talented miniatures game team over at Prodos Games, I believe they're out of Poland, they snatched up everything Warzone as soon as they could. They were like, yep, this is a license that we can do something with, and they created Warzone Resurrection. Warzone Resurrection was a kind of complete reimagining of the world, how it looks. Obviously, the story was very similar, or didn't really have any changes to it. The storyline from the Mutant Chronicles stayed the same, but there was definitely a different aesthetic. A newer, sleeker, more GI Joe, large scale army aesthetic. Whereas up until then, things were, you had Imperial soldiers in fur and kilts with giant swords. There were entire squads that you could only recognize because of their gigantic shoulder pads. That sort of thing. And this new game, sort of, the Protoss people, they wanted to turn it into more of an actual army game. They wanted to try and, or at least, again, I'm not quoting or paraphrasing because I'm going off of what it seemed like it as a gamer in the market. Because I haven't talked to anybody at Protoss, and I don't want to, say that this is definitive. But from what outside looking in, this is what it seemed like. And it seemed like they were trying to take this skirmish game and sort of jam it into a larger format for army based combat, probably as a beta for something else that this company was getting ready to gear up to buy or something like that. But either way, it was very awkward for Protoss because they were like, game is done, stats are done, here's a handful of minis. The minis looked great, but they definitely did lack the Warzone feel. They looked a lot like just kind of generic sci-fi guys, except in a couple of different places. And what ended up happening is Protoss as a company ended up having to shut their doors. To no fault of Warzone's. Honestly, that company had spent a lot of money on a lot of very cool licenses. And, my humble opinion is I think that they tried to do too much too fast and they spread themselves too thin. But either way, they held on to this new version of Warzone, this new resurrection. And fast forward a couple of years, and it seems like Resnova, the people I'm working for, got a hold of someone and was like, how much to revive the Warzone license from these companies that don't exist. And again, wheeling and dealing, stuff happened. I don't know who talked to what or anything like that. But at the end of the day, Resnova has the license to create the Warzone miniatures game. And the company Resnova reached out to me because they want me to do what I did with Dark Age for Warzone. And I'm ecstatic. I'm super jazzed. I got so immediately thrown into the work, and oh my god, this is going to be so much fun. Resnova had already put together quite a bit of information of like what they wanted, some of the structure for where the game's going to go, the aesthetic that the game's going to go with, what era in Warzone's chronology are we doing here, because that actually explains quite a bit as to what kind of models you're going to be trying to face. And once we got all that stuff hammered out, I went to town and started doing what I do, and started doing the major design work and the taking a look at a system and going, hey, I think this might work a little better. Like or taking the critical advice, and when my boss goes, how about this? And I go, oh, that sounds even greater. Like we collaborated, and we really did put together a pretty badass set of rules, if I do say so myself. They're still very much in their infancy as far as like stats and what guns do people have and whatever. But what my boss did say I could do to get you guys excited, to get you guys talking about it, to get you guys to spread the word, the fact that Warzone is coming back, and it's coming back with all of the same kind of strength, fury, and passion that I had with putting Warzone or putting Dark Age out on the market. You better damn believe I'm going to do the same thing with Warzone. And I already I already feel deep down inside that this is going to be a success because of you guys, the people who have played my games in the past. You know what I when I've got my brain and my heart set on something, that that's where it is. And right now there is not a project currently sitting in front of me that has me more psyched than this Warzone gig. So I'm telling you, get on board when you can. As soon as we have the opportunity to start, selling stuff and kickstarting things or whatever, I'm sure Resnova will start shouting to the heavens, and I will start pumping those shouts into my megaphone. You'll definitely hear about it here first when we know what's up. But yeah, so one of the things that my boss was very adamant about is that he did not want it to start off as a army game. He did not want it to start off like just replacing Warzone Resurrection, where it's just okay. Here's this giant army versus giant army with tanks and giants and monsters and all that. He wants the game to start off chronologically very early in the kind of the awakening of the dark forces. So I've got about 15 minutes. I'm gonna take some time to talk about why this game is so cool, why Warzone is as neat as it is, and why all of my fun Dark Age fluff and lore addicts, get ready to start reading some really cool stuff, because Warzone is very deep with it. It's very, very deep with feel. So in Warzone, the Earth is split up into corporations. Earth itself is kind of a poisonous wasteland that have been left to like some effectively almost kind of low-tech tribes that have learned how to get by, but they can't leave the planet because they're not that ready. Someone's gonna have to come get them and whatnot. But there are corporations, mega corporations, that technically run humanity, that run the United Planets, and that is they've got that old school miniatures game feel where you look at an army and go, I bet they do this. So you've got Bauhaus, which is, as a corporation, Bauhaus is hardline troops, very Eastern Bloc. They generally speaking they've got good equipment, solid weapons, good numbers. They are the equivalent of a blitzkrieg. They're a hammer and anvil style force, but you are probably going to be a little, unless you choose not to be and you take the right kinds of combinations of forces, you might end up being outnumbered, or extremely outnumbered if all you take are like some of the named style, like the elite style forces. You've got Capital, which is sort of the American, the kind of the North American feel. They've just got a bunch of really cool elite soldiers, some dudes that fly around on like shark-shaped jet speeders. Imperial, which is the your England, Scotland, Ireland, that the kind of the UK megacorp, and they've got some amazing elite troops, but they also have a whole wing of troops that are effectively like savages, like higher tech, like Vikings come down from the upper peninsula and join in the forces, and these guys are obviously awesome. They may not enjoy all the technology, but a gun's a gun, and they'll be happy to use that, or the giant claymore strapped to their back if that's what it takes. Let's see. I could go on for days. So there's these different corporations, and each corporation in and of itself is a faction. Then there is also the kind of this sort of governmental church called the Brotherhood, that kind of watches over everybody to make sure that they don't show signs of the dark symmetry. The dark symmetry is another word for evil demon magic. Evil demon math that 6 + 6 divided by an onion equals fireball. Like that's how dark symmetry works. It's basically they come up with these wacky equations in their weird demonic minds, and then because the equation works in a way, it bends reality and creates a spell effect. So the Brotherhood is directly opposed to dark symmetry for the sheer fact that it comes from monsters, it comes from demons, it comes from an otherworldly plane, and they believe that their miracles that they do, the clerics, actually are coming from the totem, coming from the not the totem. What is it? Coming from. It's right at the tip of my tongue. Oh, it's not gonna work. My brain stopped, just totally ground to a halt. Not the totem, like their faith, their divine connection to this idea of the light. Like they're like Catholic totemic worshippers of light and goodness, if that makes any sense, with a heavy dash of the Spanish Inquisition thrown in, because they're trying to snuff out followers of the Dark Apostles. There's several different Dark Apostles, each one kind of representing a different sort of facet of humanity's downfall. But for the most part, the largest and most influential apostle is Algaroth, which is the kind of god of war and bloodshed. And it is because of this that that brotherhood has to work super vigilantly to sniff out possible worshippers, possible cells of heathens, of heretics, because the dark symmetry is effectively like demon magic, and this evil magic math stuff will seep into humanity, and eventually cult cells will grow, and there will be individual like individuals of great repute might hear whispers in the night, promises of, hey, you can totally take over your entire corporation if you let me in, that kind of thing. Like the dark symmetry is very big about like seducing the public, and the Brotherhood is there to try and illuminate it, sniff it out, sometimes torture it out, and eliminate it. Well, so this game, in past editions, have always been, every corporation gets an army, the Brotherhood has an army, the Cartel of Man, which they don't really talk about, they kind of have an army. They're sort of like a governmentally neutral collection from all the different corporations. They're sort of like a UN with gun, or like a UN mercenary group that's all go humanity. But they all had their own factions, and then on the other side of the coin, the dark symmetry, the different apostles, each apostle had their own faction, and then introduced the Lost Tribes of Earth, and more factions arrived, and it really was a lot to ask for when a game that is being reborn effectively, after it's been 13 years since there's been a publication for it, I believe, or at least 4 or 5 years when just the company I was just talking about, Excelsior, when they were peddling their stuff, or when Protoss was peddling Warzone Resurrection. It's only been a little while since then, but even so, there's still there's a pretty big chunk of time between when that stuff was out and when and where we're at now. And Res Nova and my boss, they want this new game to go back to its roots. In every aspect, they want it to go back to its roots in size. It wants to be more of a skirmish style game, so more of the kind of game that we played with Dark Age. They want a game that is more back and forth, more tactically sound, instead of who has the biggest guns wins. They want it to be more mission based. These are all things that are things that I gladly bring to the table and gladly added to Dark Age back in the day. So this is not going to be a hard transition to turn this version of Warzone into something that we collectively, whether you're an old Warzone fan, a new Warzone fan, an old Dark Age fan, or just a person who's like, I like the idea of this critter. I would like to start this army. We want everybody to be happy. We don't want someone to be like, oh, I love this game, but I'm not going to play this faction because I don't ever play, or I because I only ever play tournaments and they suck at tournaments. We want to make sure it's fair. We want to make sure that it plays right and the game plays right and there's structure around the game. This is our opportunity to make the exact kind of sci-fi skirmish game that we want. And we're, in my humble opinion, we are doing just that. And I really do feel that where Protoss, which I don't remember if I showed what the Protoss book looks like. I don't think I did. Just in case, here it is. So that's what the cover of the Warzone Resurrection looked like, and you can even look at the kind of a little bit of the aesthetic on the book. It's a little bit different than some of that old art from Warzone and some of that old sort of Hero in the Wastes feel. That old games had. So our new game, which sadly I don't have a logo or I don't have a cover or anything to show because it's still very much in creation. So our new game is going back to the basics. It's going to the primarily you are it's really going back to the forces of light versus the forces of darkness. The mainstay armies are that of the corporations. Most people will be playing corporations, and then there's a little bit of the dark symmetry, but only really one apostle at this time, because we want to give ourselves room to grow out of this skirmish idea, get the game on its feet, get people happy, let people go, oh my god, I love this game, I love the story, I love everything that you guys are putting together, this is awesome, now I want more. And so the idea is that hopefully this baseline skirmish game, these forces of light versus forces of darkness, the corporations versus each other and versus the dark symmetry, will get people so excited and so just hopped up and grooving that when we put out a book or put out a product or something that kind of that sort of adds a little bit more to the game, to bring in larger things, bring in some of the smaller vehicles, things like that we as a company, that Res Nova as a company is ready for it financially and like production wise, and that we've got all the rules for those sorts of things hammered out and ironed out enough to the point that we are satisfied with them in game. One of the things that has always bothered me throughout gaming history, and Warzone Second Edition is is not safe from my finger waggling, because there were models that were unbelievably huge. I mean, now with some of the things that Games Workshop is doing and some of the things that Forge World is doing, it's not the same. But back in that day, it was unheard of to have a freestanding monster model that was 10 inches tall. The Biogiant, I want to say, was the Dark Apostles Biogiant was like 8.5 inches tall, and that sort of thing you saw on the battlefield and be like, what? That's a giant pile of resin. What's it doing? It's killing my opponents. Like there were certain models that were just large and in charge, and the problem with that became game balance. And we want to make sure that we do a very good job of balancing this game before we start introducing some of the giant movers and shakers that might be out there in the world. So initially, we're going to start things off smaller, start things off skirmish, nitty gritty, scenario based. Get down and dirty with the handful of models that you've got, and then as we start to really, hopefully, the sales start to take off and people start being like, oh my god, I want more, because I'm confident they're going to. I think we have got a winner here. It was a winner before, and it can be a winner again, and I think that we're going to be able to do it. And that is my primary goal for the Year of the Nerd, is to make this new Warzone game to the best of my ability, with the help from the people of Resnova backing me up and helping me clean up my own ideas, and the good playtesters on my side, and awesome models coming down the pipe, which I wish I could show you, but I don't, because the whole virus thing. I was supposed to have a painted up new Blood Beret to show you guys, but it didn't happen. So unfortunately, I got to tease that for fear. I'll show you in the future when I get a chance. Expect me to talk a lot more about this project as I can. I know that Alex and the Resnova guys wanted to be able to kind of let the cat out of the bag at Adepticon. But again, the world is what it is. And so it is partially on my shoulders now to let you know that Warzone is coming back. It's going to be amazing. And if you've ever trusted me, your professional nerd, in any other capacity, know that I firmly believe that this is going to be one of the more entertaining and one of the more exciting and fun skirmish level sci-fi games that's going to be on the market in hopefully late 2020, early 2021. Either way, I was flattered to no end to be headhunted for this project, and excited, and hopefully I will be able to show the Resnova guys and show you guys that I mean what I say, and that I want this to turn into one hell of a good sci-fi skirmish game. And hopefully all of you guys will join me on it. We'll get a chance to talk a whole lot about it at shows and on the channel and all that. But yeah, so I've got a pretty busy Year of the Nerd ahead of me, which is what this was all about. So from my studio to yours, and from my studio to your house, to your camera or tablet or PC or whatever you're watching this on, I hope that wasn't too rambly. I know I couldn't get too deep into things because it's still in a very formative stage. We're still cooking. We're still cooking the cake. We can't tell you about the icing yet. But when I know more, and when I get more concrete details and cool stuff to show you guys, you know damn well I'm going to, because I am super excited about this, and you know me, when I'm excited about something, I can't stop talking about it. So be safe out there. Remember that even though things are rough, this is our year. This is time for us to lift ourselves up off of all this doom and gloom, and put a smile on our faces. And even if it's through a camera and speakers and a electronic screen, have some fun and play some games. We'll see you next week.